Whitehouse Productions presents The Miniature Railway Adventures, Casey and the Traitor, written and read by WhiteehouseFilms, and based on a storyline by Eric Thompson. Our story begins in the 1940s. War is in full swing. The nights awaken the blaring sirens, signaling to the locals that danger looms overhead. The evacuees are safely guarded in the countryside, but even there they fear that every night could be their last. Then the planes came. Searchlights sway from left to right, trying to find these terrors from above. Air raids, though terrifying to the local residents of the local time, can prove to be useful to the petty thief. With the locals running to the shelters to take cover, the rats come out of their hiding places and take whatever they can. On one of these nights, while the skies were lit up by searchlights and gunfire, a group of scavengers scampered across the dark streets of a local town. Everyone had been escorted to the nearby shelters, and the wardens were on standby in case of any attacks. Instead of raiding homes and grabbing any rations that were hard to get hold of, the thieves took their toll on a museum which had recently had a new exhibit to their collection. The item was an emerald jewel that had been discovered in a native temple in the deepest jungles in India. The jewel was still undergoing research, but had left its researchers in a rather odd state of mood. They would become easily frustrated and often turn to physical violence if they were disturbed or things weren't presented to their liking. The thieves took what they can and made off. Among them was a recently dismissed employee of the museum who lost his job as a security guard when failing to notice a desperate LDV making off with a pistol from the last war. He had his eye on the jewel since it arrived, and something inside him urged him to have the jewel for himself. Smashing the glass that protected it, he made off with the jewel and joined the others. "I've arranged a ship at the harbour to take us to the cove outside of military views," a member of the group said. "But it's a sheer 20 miles away from here," one of the men protested. "Don't worry, there's a rail yard not far from here. The crews will be in the shelters by now, so there won't be any problem of us getting a loco." Quickly, the group made their way over to the yards, making sure they weren't spotted by the wardens. Sure enough, a loco was still in steam and was left in a siding while the crew had gone to take shelter in the bunkers. A few men went to sort out the points, while the rest boarded the engine. After prizing the points over to guide them out, the remaining half joined the group as they sped off down the line. As they passed the signal box, a warden caught sight of them and sounded the alarm, but by then they were too far ahead, and the bombing was becoming more serious. The engine coasted down the coastal line with the group cheering as they went. Unknown to them, an enemy fighter was returning back after having one of its engines blown out by defending pilots. Too late, it lost control, and the pilot bailed out as the plane glided dangerously towards the coast. The group never saw it coming. The plane's undercarriage hit the earth with a devastating blow as it skidded along towards the railway line. Both engines were now ablaze, lighting up the horror that awaited the group as it jolted onto the railway line and towards the approaching engine. The bang shook the earth. I wouldn't know what went through the minds of those men as their final seconds ticked away. The coastline was nothing more than a raging blaze as nearby fire bells echoed loudly. A short distance from the blaze, in the depths of a woodland near the beach, a smoking figure staggered its way through the rushers. As it reached an opening, it collapsed to its chest, gasping what little air its lungs could gather. The fall had knocked something out of its burnt coat pocket. The emerald jewel lay a few feet away from the dying man. He gazed at it in all its beauty. He tried to reach for it, but his strength was weak, and with a sighing thud, his arm collapsed to the ground. The last thing the man saw before darkness took him away was the sight of a glowing light which flickered slowly from inside the jewel's center. A voice of an unknown language chanted through his head, as though it was some sort of spell. As vision slowly faded to darkness, 2 words of English whispered into the man's ear. He grunted in question, hoping for the voice to repeat those words again. It did. "Wake up!" "Oi, Casey! Wake up, would you already?" Casey woke with a start. "Great Stevens rocket!" he cried. "What's happening?" "About time too. Hurry up or you'll be late." Casey looked annoyingly over at the speaking clocks that Corpse made for him for his birthday. His digital eyes looked back at him. "Oh, it's you," Casey groaned. "One of these days I'll unplug your speakers." The clock scowled. "Anyway," yawned Casey, nodding off again. "What is it I'm going to be late for?" "Well, if you don't hurry up and get yourself ready, you'll be late at helping your railway club with its extension line." Remembering this, Casey leapt out of bed and hurried to get dressed. He'd been waiting for this day for years, and he wasn't going to miss a second of it. Ho ho, so now you're deciding to listen to me, the clock called over at Casey. You should do it more often. You might get something sorted on time. I can't think why Corpse thought it was a good idea to make you, Casey sighed as he got his railway cap on. Then he remembered something. Oh, that was very strange last night. I must ask Whitehouse about it. Ask him what? Inquired the clock. What happened last night? But Casey didn't answer. Instead, he went over to the kitchen and made himself a quick breakfast. What happened last night? The clock called again. That was very funny indeed. Very funny. Casey kept muttering to himself. Oh, for Sundial's sake! What happened last night? Screamed the clock from the bedroom. Nothing that concerns nosy Parker clocks like you, came the reply, as Casey headed out the door. Casey soon reached the Model Engineer Society just on time, where he found cars over by the station yards trying out a new upgrade on one of the club's diesel engines. Hey cars, Casey called over. What are you up to? Oh, hi Casey. Oh, nothing much. We just had this diesel in for some upgrades to see if we could make it a bit more smoother and more quieter for when we need it for passenger runs. As well as that, we need it to help us move the log wagons over to the workshops. Interesting. Here, you don't know where Whitehouse is, do you? Oh yeah, I'll take you to him. Hop on the back cab, replied Cars. So Casey got on, and off they went. Cars was right. The running of the diesel was much more smoother and with less noise from its usual spluttering. But there was one thing it was lacking. Speed. Is this as fast as it can go? Casey asked. Sadly, yes, Cars called back. There wasn't enough time to get the rest of the gearbox finished, so we have to stick with running in first until we have time. It'll be quicker to walk at this pace, Casey thought to himself, but decided not to say anything about it. What seemed like 20 minutes later to Casey, they trundled past the workshops. Suddenly, there was a bang, and a large object burst out of the workshop window, brushed past Cars' nose and landed in the members' car park. Look out! Cars cried and applied the brakes. The train stopped so suddenly that Casey fell off and landed next to the raised track. What in all that's brew now was that? Casey demanded crossly once he got to his feet. Where did that blasted buffer bin go? A voice called out from inside the workshops. Corpse, what the hell are you playing at? Cars called out. That thing nearly decapitated me. Corpse appeared at the door wearing his engineering goggles. He looked about to see where the buffer had sprung off to. Blimey, those new buffers we ordered off sure to have some spring in them, he said proudly. Though it could do with a bit of ease. We don't want any extreme fly shunting, do we? No indeed, muttered Casey, straightening his cap. Listen, is Whitehouse about? I've got something important I need to talk to him about. Yeah, he's over by the site loading logs into the wagons, replied Corpse. He'll be using Puffer to take them round here for making the sleepers. If you hurry, you might catch him before he leaves. So running as fast as he could, Casey hurried off to the site of the new extension. The extension of the track was to start at the middle of the steep gradient, of which the line disappears into the trees and undergrowth. The line then curves back to where it passes the engine sheds and connects up with the main track for the home stretch. Permission to build the line had been passed on by the directors, and the path to build the line was nearly cleared. Permission was also granted for any large trees that were in the way to be taken down and cut into logs. These would then be later made into the line's new sleepers. Any small trees that were found were dug up and moved to a safe location out of harm's way. Whitehouse had been at the site since early morning, busy shifting the cut logs to the workshops with his engine Puffer. He had just finished loading his wagons and was just about to make another journey. Whitehouse, wait up! Whitehouse turned round from his controls and saw Casey running up the line. Ah, there you are, Casey, he said, stepping off his truck. Good timing. I need your help to gather up the rest of these logs and get them loaded into the wagons there in that siding. Cars told me the chairman's got new members signed up to help us out. Yes, that's all very well and good, but there's something I need to talk to you about. Casey looked around in case anyone was listening. It's kind of important, you see. Understanding the situation, Whitehouse sat down in his driving truck and smiled at his friend reassuringly. Whatever's troubling you, Case, I can help you out the best I can. Now come on, what's up? Casey sat down on one of the trucks and began. Well, it all happened last night, you see. You may remember I stayed late to get Lady Granger's steam drained out. It's a time-consuming job, but I always like to do it properly. You know me. Well, while I was passing the Motor Car Society's entrance, I stopped the car. Why? Did you have a flat tire? No. Did you break down? No. So why did you stop there? Something made me stop, Casey answered quietly. Now, I don't often get confused, but this was very confusing. So I got out of the car and walked about. Now this was something rather unusual, because if there's one thing I don't do, it's walk around outside the Motor Car Society. Well, you never know who might still be there, do you? Even at that time of night. But then, I heard a voice. It said, "I wish to take revenge. I wish to take control. I wish to take over everything." Then shortly afterwards, I heard another voice. "Come forth, weary seeker, and accept this advice. Bring me the rock that'll give you power, and I'll lead you to paradise." I then noticed that the voices were coming from that old shed round the back. You know the one where Bernard used to make his homemade petrol in. It's been closed off since our lost engine experience, but now, strange blue lights were flickering in and out through the nooks and crannies. I found this very odd, and decided to go in for a closer look. So, moving backwards to confuse anyone with evil intents and to think I was going forwards, I found myself an old oak tree and climbed to a spot where I can get a good view of things. What did I see, you may ask? Well, not much, I answer. The old shed stood in the yard looking very shabby and very sinister. Then, I heard the second voice again. "Come forth, weary seeker, and accept this advice. Bring me the rock that'll give you power, and I'll lead you to paradise." Well, all that talk about rocks and control is very strange, though I've never taken an interest in rocks, apart from rock cakes, but that's a different matter. So, I got down from the tree, got into the car, and drove off towards home, so if you have any idea on what's going on, you may as well say so. As Casey finished, Whitehouse sat back and thought about it carefully. "Casey," he said at last, "are you sure you weren't daydreaming?" "Of course I'm sure," snapped Casey crossly. "I don't imagine voices whilst driving. Well, nothing like that anyway." "Well, all I can say is," began Whitehouse slowly. "Yes?" "That I haven't got a clue on what's going on." "Oh." Casey looked disappointed. Whitehouse smiled as he patted his friend's shoulder. "So, the best thing I suggest to you is to ask Jane. She might help. She's a very intelligent girl, you know." He turned back to puff his controls. "Whitehouse, before you go, answer me one question. Do you think I need to go and see a psychiatrist about all this?" "Don't be stupid, Casey." No, listen, be fair with me. You don't think I'm going mad, do you?" But Whitehouse didn't answer. He just gave Casey a look, turned back to puff his controls, and head off with his train to the workshops. He didn't answer. "He didn't answer!" exclaimed Casey. Oh, I might as well go and talk to Jane about it when she gets here. Perhaps she might know what it's all about. So, with his question unanswered, Casey sighed and began making his way to get his engine, Lady Grange, ready for work. Little did he know his answer would be answered in due course. Jane Wilkinson had arrived late that morning. Her car had to go in for its MOT, so she had to get the train over to the museum. Now she was waiting over at the club station for a lift over to the club room. While she waited, a boy walked over and sat down on one of the benches. Jane had never seen him before. "Sorry, there's no public runs today," she said to him. The boy looked up and smiled. "It's all right," he said smoothly. "I'm here to help you with your club's railway." Jane was going to ask why, when Cars walked up. "Ah, hello there," Cars said cheerfully, shaking the boy's hand. "You must be the new member who's come to join us, right? I'm Mark Carson, this is Jane Wilkinson, and, your name is?" "Stephen Mercade," replied the boy. "I joined here after I was fired from the Motorcar Society nearby, because of my interest in railways, you see. I heard you guys were looking members, so I decided to join up." Jane smiled. "I'm glad you did," she said. "With the amount of trouble they cause for us, it'd be worse if they had new recruits." "Well, anyway," Cars butted in, "we're very glad to have you here, Stephen, and hope you'll be a credit to everyone. Now, if you'd like to come this way, please, we'll get you started on your work." But just as they started to walk away, a whistle blew, and Whitehouse pulled into the station with his loaded wagons rattling behind Puffer. "Ah, Whitehouse, this is our new member the chairman signed up, Stephen Mercade. This is Mike Whitehouse, our station shunter." "A pleasure to meet you, sir," Stephen said kindly. "Oh, yes, hello," said Whitehouse, shaking Stephen's hand. "Ah, Jane, glad you're here. Listen, Casey's got a bit of a problem he wants to talk to you about." "A problem?" Jane said, rather confused. "Well, yeah, that's what he told me. A very big problem. Sounds very serious." But Cars wasn't interested in Casey's problems. Work needed to be completed, and he couldn't waste any more time. "There's no time for problems," he said hurriedly. "Work on the line will soon take his mind off it." "Even so, I'd better have a word with Casey and see what's wrong," said Jane. Whitehouse offered them a lift over to the club room, so they climbed on and off they went. No one noticed Stephen smirking quietly to himself as they rounded the bend. And I thought the car club was easy. This'll be like taking candy from a baby, he thought to himself. Some time later, Casey had got Lady Grange steamed up and ready for work. He was just moving off shed when he saw Jane walking towards him. Stephen followed behind. Hiya, Case. Morning, Jane. Glad I got a chance to speak to you. Listen, I want to talk to you about... sorry, who's this? Oh, sorry, this is the new member who's joined up to help us with the line's extension. Stephen Mercade, this is Christopher Jones Jr., or Casey as we like to call him. Stephen Mercade? Casey said slowly. That's the name, mate. Mercade, Stephen said proudly. Yes, well, nice to meet you, Casey said, shaking Stephen's hand. He used to be a member of the Motor Car Society but got fired a few days ago, Jane began. Casey stopped shaking Stephen's hand and rudely withdrew it. He walked over to check the water gauges. Yes, well, it's good to have you here, I think, he muttered coldly. Thank you, smiled Stephen. He then looked around the area. Do you know, you've got a lovely place here, hidden away from the outside world. It's really grand, this. Well, we like it, don't we, Casey? And we're very glad you like it too, aren't we, Casey? Jane said kindly. Oh yes, Casey said sarcastically from the cab. We're overcome with delight. Very overcome. Jane looked over at Casey and gave him a hard stare. What had gotten into him? Then, I take it there's no trouble about me making my membership permanent then? Asked Stephen. Casey was surprised. Staying permanently? He asked. Oh, well, I'm not so sure if you want to stay here. I mean, with all the noise and smoke, which I'm sure you'll hate after a while. Listen here, there's a train in half an hour if you're quick. Goodbye. With that, he drove off to fetch his trucks. Is he alright? Asked Stephen. Don't take any notice of Casey. He's sometimes a bit grumpy or moody at this time of the day. Especially today of all days, reassured Jane. Yes, well, don't worry. I won't, said Stephen. So tell me, where do I start work? News had spread about Stephen's arrival, and everyone was making him feel right at home. Though, not everyone. Casey was very quiet while collecting the logs, and didn't take any notice of Stephen when he next saw him. He never liked the Motor Car Society or its members, especially Grinder and Gears. Whenever those two are about, trouble is just around the corner for the railway as they try to come up with new schemes to close it down. But for the last few days, Grinder and Gears were nowhere to be seen. They never came out of the gates or caused any trouble for the railway. Now this was very odd, and Casey decided to talk to Cars about it. But when Casey found him, he noticed that he had called all the members round for an important meeting. Right, now I've just been advised, Cars began, that the chairman has decided that we'll be continuing the construction of the extension line during both day and night, so it'll be ready for the summer run. If there's any members who wish to take part in the night runs, please sign the notice board inside the club room. Also, I'll be taking up the role as chairman while our current one is away to discuss the new timetables with the directors during the next few days. If anyone has any troubles or has seen any strange activity that they want to report, please inform me at once. This was a good opportunity. I've seen something strange, Cars, Casey called out to him. All the members fell silent and looked towards him. Well, Casey began, I heard some strange voices coming from Bernard's old petrol shed at the back of the Motor Car Society. Bernard's old petrol shed? One of the members asked. Well, but ever since the directors found out about it, it's been locked and barricaded for years. Hearing this, Stephen went as white as a sheet. Shed? He inquired. What do you know about it then, eh? Look, all I'm saying is I heard voices coming from it, that's all, said Casey. But everyone didn't believe Casey and his voices, and went back to work. Casey sighed and went into the clubroom to get signed up for the night run. It was not worth telling everyone about what happened last night, so he decided to forget the whole thing. Maybe Whitehouse was right. Maybe he was daydreaming or something like that. While he was signing the notice, Casey was pleased to see that his friends had also signed up for the night run, but was disappointed when he saw Stephen's signature as well. When he had finished signing the notice and got himself a cup of tea, Cars and Stephen walked into the clubroom. So, you didn't have any luck with the inn then? Cars asked. Sadly, no. They were booked solid, Stephen replied sadly. But don't worry, I'll find somewhere to stay. You'll see. It was at that moment that Cars noticed Casey trying to sneak out of the door. Casey, you've got a spare room, haven't you? He called after him. Casey went pale and froze. A Motor Car Society member staying at his house? Surely not. Well, that is, he stammered. Ah, good, then it's settled, Cars said. You two can leave early today so you can help Stephen get settled in. Oh, thanks, Stephen said, giving Casey a smile. I don't have that much baggage to carry, so there'll be no trouble. He was right. He didn't have much baggage, only a rucksack and a very large and heavy trunk. It took a brave while for Casey to lift into the car, and even longer to unload it and take it up the stairs. When he got to the guest room, he noticed that Stephen wasn't there. Where did he get to? He soon found out. Wow, you've got it all furnished and all, Casey, a voice called out. You really do know how to make a guest feel welcome. Casey knew which room that voice was coming from, and he dashed into his own bedroom to find Stephen slumped on top of his bed, feeling right at home. Just leave the trunk outside the door, will you? Stephen yawned sleepily. I'll unpack it in the morning. And with that, he was sound asleep. But where am I going to sleep then? Casey asked. Where d'ye think? Said the alarm clock. It's obvious it's not here. Casey sighed sadly. There was no point in arguing. He had no choice but to move into the guest bedroom, whether he liked it or not. He got whatever things he needed and got ready for a very uncomfortable sleep. Poor Casey slept badly that night. The bed in the guest room was old and had worn out springs, so whenever he turned over, the bed gave a loud creak and kept waking him up. In the end, he ended up sleeping on the sofa, which was not much of an improvement. Soon, morning came, and Casey woke feeling very worn out. Stephen wasn't. Rise and shine, Casey, he said cheerfully. We've got a busy day ahead of us. Come on, let's get a quick breakfast and let's get down to the railway. Breakfast. Breakfast was the last thing Casey wanted to think about. But after a cup of strong coffee, he felt a bit more awake, and he and Stephen headed on towards the railway. By now, progress on the line was going along ahead of schedule. The trenches had now been dug out, and ballast was now being added in. The gang were now starting on laying the new rails and marking out where any sidings had to be made. Cars and corps were busy filling in the trenches halfway with ballast, while Casey, Whitehouse and Stephen were beginning on laying the new tracks. The logs had now been cut into sleepers, and the new rails had been ordered in, so the three were kept busy laying the tracks into place and making sure that everything was level. By lunchtime, Jane came up with some refreshments, and they all looked at their work so far. Well, it's coming along nicely, said Cars. We should probably get half the track done by sunset. While they were chatting, something flashed in Corpse's eye. Something green was sticking out of the trenches. Yeah, what's that over there? He pointed out to the others. They all looked over till they could see the object. Cars walked over and had a closer look at it. We didn't dig a drain pipe up, did we? He said. Maybe it's a bit of an old glass bottle or something, suggested Casey. Cars picked it up and looked at it. The others gathered around to see. Carefully brushing the dirt away, Cars revealed that the object was a large emerald green jewel which shone brightly in the sunlight. Stephen's eyes grew wide with amazement, while Jane's heart began to thump rapidly. How beautiful, she said with wonder. It's like the Emerald City from The Wizard of Oz. Let's have a look. Oh, no you don't, cried Stephen as he grabbed the jewel from Cars. The others stared speechless at him. Why, what's wrong, Stephen? Asked Whitehouse. Stephen's eyes darted from one person to the other. It's just that, well, for all we know, it could be, a priceless artifact that could be worth a bit of money. I agree, said Corpse, coming up behind Stephen and taking the jewel from his hands. We should see about putting it into a museum or contact someone to look after it or do some research on it. Good idea, said Cars. I'll contact someone later on, and I'll put this here somewhere safe for the time being. Anyway, let's get back to work, you lot. Everyone went back to their jobs and continued with the building. Stephen seethed angrily as he threw a couple of sleepers down. Ow! Hey, watch it, said Whitehouse, who was busy securing a rail down. I'm right in front of you, you know. Sorry, Stephen said quickly. I wasn't paying attention. I've got one or two things in my mind at the moment. Right, that's okay. Just be careful next time, said Whitehouse sternly. Casey was monitoring Stephen's movements nearby. Ever since they found that jewel, he'd been acting rather strange and very shifty, almost as if his character just changed all of a sudden. I wonder what could have caused this sudden change, he thought to himself. Stephen, we're nearly out of rails. Could you go and get some from the workshops, please? Called Cars. Righto, called Stephen, and went off. He'd been gone for a long time, and by now the sun was beginning to set. Cars was beginning to wonder what was keeping Stephen. They had now used up all the last bits of rail, and no more had turned up. He should be back by now, Cars said to Corpse. Wonder what's keeping him? I don't know, but all this waiting is making me hungry, said Corpse, whose stomach was growling. Tell you what, suggested Whitehouse. Me and Jane will go up to the chip shop and get everyone something. Yes, well, you and Jane go and get the orders, Whitehouse, and Casey, you go and see if you can find Stephen, see where he's got to. Me and Corpse will continue on the line here, said Cars. When Casey reached the workshops, he found that there was no signs of life from inside. The lights weren't on, but he could see the rails sitting on the bench from the light of the moon. Where did Stephen get to? He couldn't have gone far, Casey thought to himself, but he was to find out sooner than expected. From across the yards, Casey could hear a door close, and he could see a shadowy figure walking away from the office building. Wonder who that is, Casey thought, and decided to follow. Keeping within a good distance so the figure wouldn't spot him, Casey followed it till he reached the station. From the light of the lamps, Casey could see that the figure was Stephen. What on earth was he doing? Stephen looked around and smiled sinisterly as he headed for the exit. What is he up to? Casey thought, and quietly followed. He followed Stephen for a good while till he stopped at the entrance of the MCS. Quietly, Stephen prized open the wire mesh gates and slowly sneaked in. Now what's he up to? Casey thought to himself. I knew there was something odd about him. I better get a closer look at things. Thankfully, Casey saw the old oak tree climb before and climbed to the same spot where he can get a good view of things. He could see Stephen heading towards the courtyards and over towards Burnett's old petrol shed. Awaken, dear seeker, I've taken your advice. I have brought you the rock of all power, now lead me to paradise, announced Stephen. There was a long pause. He snapped, thought Casey. That's what he's done. He's completely snapped. Oh well, better go down and get him, I suppose. Who are you? A voice called out. Casey turned back. He knew that voice. Great-grandfather Francis, Stephen whispered quietly. Who are you? The voice said again. Now Casey was starting to feel a bit scared. He never believed in ghosts, but now, even though he witnessed a few ghostly things in his past, he was starting to have second thoughts. It is I, Stephen Mercade, announced Stephen. I have brought you your goal. The silence came again. From within the depths of the shed, small plumes of blue light started to swirl. Then, a gust of wind started to blow around the area. Casey held onto the tree for dear life. As the wind started to die down, the spirals of light started to form into a ghostly figure and presented itself before Stephen. The figure wore shabby clothes and worn-out workman's boots. Casey took a closer look at the figure. He had seen people wearing clothes like that, but that was only up at the museum. Well done, my dear seeker, the spirit said as it smiled at Stephen. You've made your family proud, but I will need someone to do my bidding since I cannot grasp the jewel just yet. I am worthy to assist in any commands, Stephen smiled back. But just before any more could be discussed, the back door of the Motorcar Society swung open and Grinder and Gears stormed out. 2 weeks, Grinder said crossly as he turned to lock the door. 2 bloody weeks of tank cleaning, and all because somebody wanted to do overtime. Well, at least we're getting more money out of it, Gears protested. At least we didn't get kicked out like that little brat Stephen. Yeah, if I see him again, I'll give him... Grinder replied, but froze when he and Gears turned and saw Stephen. You! They all both said in alarm. You've got some nerve to come back here, growled Gears, especially for what you said to the boss. Ooh, thought this shed would be good for a train layout, you said, and with that you were out of here like a clapped-out motor. Why don't we show Stephen what we think of these real lovers, said Grinder as he cracked his knuckles menacingly. Hold the rock before him, the spirit told Stephen. Stephen closed his eyes and did what he was told. He pointed the jewel in front of Grinder and waited. The 2 brothers burst into fits of laughter. You think a stupid piece of glass is going to hurt me? Grinder said when he could finally speak. Ha! What a joke! Well, how's this for the punchline? And he hurtled towards Stephen. Focus now, the spirit whispered. Stephen concentrated. Then, the unknown happened. Grinder stopped in his tracks and stared. The jewel started to give a creepy glow of different shades of green. The glow then started to turn to spirals of light. Now, the spirit demanded. Stephen opened his eyes and lurched forward. The spiral started to form into a beam of light and shot directly towards Grinder. He flew across the yard and crashed into the side of the wall and landed on the scrap pile. His body started to twitch rapidly. "Grinder, are you alright, bro?" Gears called out. "Oh, God," Grinder groaned. "Oh, I feel so weak. God, what happened?" Gears helped him to his feet. As Gears helped his brother to his feet, he noticed something different about him. His eyes were changing color. They were changing from blue to green and then purple. His voice was changing too. "Oh, God. Oh, I await my orders, master," Grinder called out. "Give me my orders, master." And he knelt before Stephen. "Grinder, have you gone insane, bro?" Gears called out in disbelief. He was starting to get a bit scared. Stephen smiled as he walked up to Grinder. "Worked better than I thought," he said quietly. "Oh yes, Gears. I almost forgot about you." He leaned forward and whispered into Grinder's ear. "Here are my orders, Grinder. Tell every member of this society to get here as quick as they can. Tell them Bernard has given everyone a pay rise and wants them to come here and collect it tonight. When they get here, give them a good tuning, if you know what I mean. You can start with your little brother." Grinder stood up and turned to Gears. A sinister smile slowly started to form on his face as he walked slowly towards Gears. Gears, on the other hand, was trying to find a way out, but he was fenced in and there was no way of escaping. Now, Grinder, come on. It's me. It's your little brother, Gears. Come on. You can't do this to me, would you? "Don't worry, Gears. It's not so bad when you get used to it," Grinder said, as he grabbed Gears by the scruff of the neck. He held him towards Stephen, who was ready with the jewel. "No!" Gears screamed, but there was no more to be said. He was now under the power of the Emerald Jewel. It was too much for Casey. He jumped down from the tree and sprinted back to the railway. Stephen's grandfather's spirit felt his presence. "We had a spy watching us," he informed. "Make sure the others don't believe what he says. Be back here when the time is right to attack, where you'll find your army ready and waiting for battle." "As you wish, grandfather," Stephen said. He gave Grinder the jewel and followed Casey back to the club. Casey hurried into the station, straining every muscle till he came to rest at the steps of the footbridge. "That does it. That certainly clarifies it. I knew Stephen was trouble the moment Jane said he was from the MCS, and what's worse, he's got them on his side to cause even more disaster for all of us here." He climbed to the top of the footbridge to get a good view of things. He couldn't see Stephen anymore, but he could see Corpse working on the extension line while Cars was making his way towards the office. They should have known better to make him join up. "You blind fools!" he called out into the night. "Casey, what are you talking about?" Casey jumped in shock as he turned round. Whitehouse and Jane stared up at him from the bottom of the bridge. "Are you feeling alright, Case?" Jane asked. "No, I'm not," Casey snapped crossly. "It's that troublemaker Stephen I'm cross with. I just saw him go into the Murder Car Society and turn Grinder and Gears into mindless zombies." "Now come off it, Casey. What gave you that idea?" "You've got to believe me. I saw him go into—" "Saw who?" Stephen appeared behind Whitehouse. "I was just getting the rails when I had to go and use the gents nearby. The ones in the club were shut and I had to go up to the museum to use them. What's up with Casey?" "I think he's annoyed by something," Jane began. "Too bloody right I am!" burst out Casey, jumping down from the bridge. "I'm annoyed with no good Murder Car Society members like you." Whitehouse and Jane were in great shock. It had been many years since Casey had a huge meltdown like this. Hearing this, Stephen burst into a flow of tears and fell to his knees. It was very odd for a grown boy to do. "I thought this railway would be more suitable for me to join," he sobbed. "All the other clubs neglected me because I said I was a member of some stupid, cruel motor car club for less than a few minutes." Sympathetically, Whitehouse pulled out his handkerchief and gave it to Stephen, while Jane knelt down to comfort him. "No one's neglecting you," she said soothingly, "and this is a suitable railway for you to join, even if you were part of the MCS for a while." "Take Stephen to the club room, Jane, and give him and the others their takeaways," Whitehouse said quietly. He waited till they were out of hearing range before he advanced angrily on Casey. "What has gotten into you?" "I could say the same thing," Casey retorted. "Do you not realise he's going to cause a lot of trouble for all of us? Casey, Stephen is no longer part of the MCS. Why can't you get that into that stupid, idiotic head of yours?" Whitehouse was now as red as his t-shirt. "People change, Casey. Look at Cars, for example. Yes, it took him a while to get used to our ways, but he changed. I thought you were the sort of person who welcomes people to the railway, but now I can see you've changed for the worse. And if you carry on like this, I won't be sorry to report you to the committee." Casey was about to reply to this threat when the two heard a loud scream come from the office. "That sounded like cars!" Casey exclaimed. "Didn't I tell you trouble would soon arrive?" With no time to lose, the two darted quickly from the station and hurried over to the office, wondering what the matter was.